Type 2 Hero by Mad Nimrod. Chapter 8 Resolution and History. Alright, quick note before we begin. I wanted to apologize for the long wait between episodes. Last few days have been kind of crazy. I got sick again and was having issues with that, and on top of that, copyright issues when I did record, so hopefully that's over now and we can get into daily uploads again. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the chapter. Zuko sat in a daze. He was gonna get a new left arm. After everything that happened, he could barely remember what it felt like having one of those. What would it be like? Was it gonna look like something from an anime? Or maybe something like he'd seen in the support course workshops? He hoped it wouldn't be too bulky. It would be awkward if it were so heavy he walked lopsided. There were more questions bouncing around his skull, but they were all derailed when he noticed Melissa had picked up his right arm and was looking at it very closely. "What are you?" Izuku meekly asked. His face felt warm at just how close the tall American girl was. She looked up at him and gave a soft smile that made him more flustered. "Just giving your arm a close look," she replied with her glass bell voice. "I'll be taking more precise measurements back at school, where I actually have tools. But observations made here can give me an idea of what sort of arm to make you. Has to be combative, but not obtrusive." She gave his arm a slight squeeze, eliciting a shy squeak from Izuku, before continuing. "You're not too muscular right now, so I can't make it too heavy. What sort of fighting style do you think you'll be using?" Izuku spoke through his blushing. Nazu and Sir Night-Eye were talking about teaching me how to fight with weapons and utilizing my speed." This seemed to pique her interest, making her look him in the eyes. "Weapons?" she asked. "Will they complement your quirk?" No." Izuku turned away, looking down for a moment before looking back to Melissa. "Wait, may I ask what your quirk is?" Melissa looked at him, then gave a smile as she started writing in her notebook. "Take a guess," she challenged. Izuku looked at her best he could. Pushing past her beauty, he noted she lacked any form of physical alterations, so it was likely an emitter-type quirk, since she was apparently acing her course. Something along the lines of technopathy?" he asked after a minute. She smiled and shook her head. High intelligence?" Another head shake. Good vision?" Denied. Elemental command?" A laugh and a denial. This continued for another minute or two, with Izuku going through his mental list of possible quirks and her denying it. Eventually, he sighed and drooped his shoulders. "What is your quirk?" he asked in defeat. Melissa simply smiled again, reached into her wallet, and pulled out her ID card. Izuku looked at it, specifically the lower right corner. There was a small box in the corner that had one of two symbols in it. If someone had a quirk, this box would have a big green Q in it, where the bottom line would turn sharply upward like a checkmark. Next to the box would then say the quirk's name and a quirk's summary of its effects. However, if the person were quirkless, the Q would be red, and instead of a checkmark, the bottom of the line would go down a bit further, with another short line going perpendicular through it, turning the bottom line into an X. It was a symbol Izuku was all too familiar with. It was a symbol he hated, knowing that so many people would think he was less than human because of it. It was the same symbol that was on Melissa's ID. Izuku stared in shock a few seconds longer before Melissa took her ID back, calmly putting it away. Then he stared at her in amazement. An amazing person, a beautiful lady, and she was... quirkless? Yeah, she smiled. I'm among the few without powers. Admittedly, America has a higher percentage of quirkless, and indeed, many of our heroes are the same. That's why we've got a bigger focus on support gear and technology. Oh, Izuku vocalized. I was quirkless, and here in Japan, we're treated that nicely. He gave a weak chuckle and stopped, realizing he had subconsciously started rubbing his left shoulder. He quickly set his arm back down, but the look on Melissa's face said it all. With that sentence and gesture, she figured out he was quirkless, and lost his arm because of it. Oh my god, she whispered. It's in the past. Izuku tried to explain it away. Really? Nothing to worry about. Melissa stared a bit longer before flipping to another page in her notebook and writing something really fast. Izuku was worried about what she was writing, but noted her face was one of grim determination. Hopefully it was a good thing. While Melissa and Izuku were in the living room going over things, Netsu and Inko had moved into the kitchen. Inko prepared tea for them both and sat across the kitchen table from the principal. I have to thank you for doing this, Inko spoke as she sat down. Honestly, after everything that happened over the past year, I'm glad to see Izuku genuinely smile again. Everything that happened over the past year is the failings of society, Netsu admitted. With Japan's discrimination against quirkless, I knew a case like your son's would happen eventually. I had been keeping an eye out, catching what I could before any lasting damage was done. He gave an ashamed sigh. I am truly sorry for what happened to your son. You don't need to apologize, the mother smiled. Izuku's dream has always been to be a hero, to help people. Just when he had given up on that dream, when he was at his lowest, you came and pulled him back up. I think you were the first supportive voice he had before now. She looked down in her own shame. Even I wasn't as supportive as I should have been. There were a few seconds of silence as the two adults sipped on their tea. I'd like your son to see the school therapist, Netsu stated. I know he had to undergo physical therapy after the incident, but I saw something yesterday morning that proved he needs more mental therapy as well. It's covered by the school, so you don't need to worry about payments. I am grateful, Inko set her cup down. But I've been curious for the past week. Hero training, making him a prosthetic for free, now therapy. Does your school normally bend over backwards like this for students? Netsu stared a moment before giving a laugh. No, Netsu admitted. But like I said, your son has suffered a lot, and the best I can do is help him out of it. Plus, I kind of see myself in him. Brilliant, noble, maybe a tad bit more modesty, and completely ostracized by society because of something outside of his control. It took me literally decades to get accepted by the Hero Union, and even nowadays some citizens refuse to accept the fact an animal like me can be a hero. So, if I can help someone who's also suffered get up faster, I most certainly will, especially if they have the makings of a genuine hero. He took another sip, enjoying the flavor of his tea. This is quite delicious. You must tell me the brand. Family recipe, Inko beamed. Netsu chuckled and the two adults continued drinking in silence. Excuse me one sec. Todoroki lay on his futon, staring at the ceiling of his bedroom. His father was at work, and he was permitted to do only ladder drills today, due to this healing leg. This is what gave him the free time he was currently enjoying. As he felt the ache in his leg, he thought back to the previous day. The USJ was his first actual experience fighting villains, and that one lava villain almost got him. He would have to train his eyesight harder. He never wanted to feel so weak again. While his thoughts were on his ice quirk, he remembered that ice girl from the general education class. He recalled how she was almost gliding around the area, how she took his ice and reshaped it into a weapon for her friend, how she could make ice float in the air without making it into snow. Her use of that quirk was beyond anything he imagined possible with his own. Seeing what she could do, seeing just how easily it came to her, even just seeing her. Beautiful. He shot to his feet, then staggered back onto his bed because his leg was still aching. After a minute, he got up a bit more calmly and walked to the computer in his room. He overheard that girl's name was Moriboshi. The school would keep her address secret, but the online phone book would no doubt have her address listed. All he had to do was look through the list of Moriboshi names living in town, and he could find her in no time. He knew Moriboshi could not be that common of a name, so that list shouldn't be one name. Todoroki stared at his computer screen, bewildered at what he saw. Mustafu was a large city, well over 100,000 people living there, and there was only one family with the last name Moriboshi. It really wasn't a common name, huh? After making sure it was the right Moriboshi, Todoroki quickly grabbed his bag and a nondescript hat. Making sure all his hair was under his hat, he quickly jogged through the halls of his massive house and out the door. No one was home, so he didn't need to tell anyone where he was going. He also knew his dad would be furious if they learned where he was going, but he didn't care. He was a man on a mission. 1 weekend later.
And after everything calmed down,
Melissa told Izuku,
my classmate looks at the goat and says, I won't tell anyone if you won't, before just walking away.
Izuku almost stumbled from laughing so hard at the end of her story. The two of them were walking down the hall towards the support course workshops, with Principal Nezu in front of them. Izuku was fully recovered from what happened in the USJ, though he wasn't able to get a replacement jacket yet, so he came wearing the one with some bloodstains and a disintegrated sleeve. Izuku was still laughing by the time they reached the workshops, and Nezu raised his paw to knock on the door before the door opened on its own.
Good God, Mito-chan,
Mei smiled as she stepped out.
I could hear you laughing from...
Her gaze fell on Melissa and she stopped talking. She slowly looked the American girl up and down before turning to Izuku while gesturing to Melissa.
Mito-chan, who is this Titan?
This, Nezu stepped in to explain,
is Malicious Shield, a third-year transfer student. Melissa, this is Mei, the girl I told you about over the weekend. Principal, why are you telling people about me?
Mei asked.
I don't even have any babies to demonstrate yet.
Babies? The tall American asked.
Her inventions,
the small boy explained.
Because,
Nezu clapped his paws together,
Melissa here will be spearheading a particular project that I want you to help her out with. She's going to be making a combat-capable prosthetic for Midoriya.
At the conclusion of his words, Mei stared at Melissa for a few seconds, before turning and staring at Izuku. After a few seconds of silence, Mei gave a happy scream, startling everyone, before pulling Izuku into a tight hug and spinning around.
Congrats, Mito-chan!
Mei cheered as she kept spinning Izuku around. His head held tight into her shoulder.
You're getting a new arm, and I'm gonna help you make it. It's gonna be so awesome. I'll have blades and a tripwire and maybe a hack module and... May, please.
Netsu laughed as Melissa stared in total shock.
Let the boy down before you break something.
May gave a few more spins before setting Izuku down, chuckling as the small boy wobbled on his feet. Everyone took this opportunity to finally enter the workshop while Izuku staggered in behind them and collapsed in a stool. Netsu and May helped Melissa unload the various papers and notes she was carrying in her bag. As Melissa got them arranged nice and neat, Izuku gasped and straightened up.
May,
he stuttered.
there's something I need to tell you.
The inventor turned as Izuku got to his feet and bowed.
I lost the desk you made me last week. I lost it in the lake area during the villain attack. I'm so sorry.
He started tearing up a bit.
I know you worked so hard on it, and I lost it on the first day you gave it to me, and...
His apologies ceased when May hugged him tight. There wasn't the same sort of hug she gave earlier. That ended with her spinning him around. This hug was a warm, comforting one.
Don't worry,
May whispered into his ear.
Your life is more important than any device in this lab. I'm sorry I couldn't be there for you.
Izuku teared up a bit more at her words and returned the hug the best he could. They held the hug a few more moments before May pulled away and gave a trademark smile.
Honestly, Mito-chan, I wanted to talk to you about that desk. Give me a minute.
She hopped off, past Melissa and Nezu, and reached down behind her table. After a moment, she straightened with a smile and exclaimed,
Ta-da!
As she held up a certain contraption Izuku recognized instantly.
The desk?
He gasped.
How did you... We're a hero school, Mito-chan.
May laughed as she walked over with the desk and started putting it on the smaller boy.
I heard what happened. Tracked the energy from the vial, hired a fish kid from management to retrieve it. You know,
Nezu turned from helping Melissa arrange notes.
You still need to tell me how you managed to duplicate the red matter after seeing it once. Classified.
May giggled as she clipped the last strap for Izuku.
All done, Mito-chan. Now get to class. I don't want to know what Midnight would do if you're late.
Izuku nodded, gave May a quick half hug, and dashed out the door. Once he was gone, May clapped her hands and turned to Melissa and Nezu.
Okay. What are we dealing with? I was thinking of something like this.
Melissa pointed at one of the pages.
Not bulky, but definitely not the Uncanny Valley sort of limbs that America used to make before they reached the logical conclusion that they looked creepy. Plus, with this design, we can hide a few weapons for him, like... Stopping you right there.
May interrupted as she pointed at one page that detailed small flashbangs.
None of these. Nothing explosive around Mito-chan. He has PTSD involving explosions. This, on the other hand...
It was almost lunchtime, and Izuku had spent the last hour and a half with Class 1A. Since they couldn't do the exercises in the USJ, it had been decided Izuku would work with them during the pre-lunch study period to see if there was any other way to improve their quirks. Aizawa looked like a mummy and was snoozing on the floor as Izuku was finishing up with Yayorozu.
It looks like the amount of lipids used up is less dependent on the mass of the creation,
Izuku stated,
but rather the materials the object is made from. Try creating things using ceramics instead of metals in the future, and record the drain up for those. If you ever need to create something particularly complicated, but one-time use, it might be more feasible to use lighter materials to retain more energy. I see.
Momo nodded in agreement.
I'll start small, with knives and stuff. She gave a smile. You are definitely hero material, Midoriya-kun. Anyone who told you otherwise was gravely mistaken.
Izuku chuckled and blushed at the compliment, as everyone else gathered their belongings to head to lunch. Once they opened the door, however, Class 1A found the way blocked.
What's going on?
Izuku asked as he got up. He had to get on his tiptoes to look over everyone's shoulders, but he could see a literal horde of people was blocking the doorway. It took a moment, but he recognized a lot of them as students from Class 1B. He also saw Monoma was at the front of the group, looking as snobby as ever.
We came to see the famous Class 1A,
he sneered to Kirishima.
Honestly, I'm not that impressed. Bet you guys feel all high and mighty because you fought some villains, huh? Think you're all that? Excuse me?
Everyone in the hallway froze at the voice, while the students in the classroom turned with confused expressions as Izuku squeezed between everyone to address the Class B student directly. No one in Class 1A had ever really heard him shout like that, and they were kind of worried he might explode if he did it again.
You think we're happy we got attacked?
Izuku asked.
You think we're glad we almost died? 'Cause that's what's happened. Back there and... Oh my god!
One of the Class B students, whom Izuku recognized as Tetsu, exclaimed. Everyone turned to him in confusion as he raised his hand and pointed at Izuku.
What happened?
Izuku was initially confused until he noticed the student was pointing at his side, where the bloodstains from last week were still fairly prevalent on his jacket.
Oh,
he explained.
Villain kind of disintegrated my sleeve, and I haven't been able to get a replacement coat yet.
Dude, another student gasped.
You lost your freaking arm and you're more worried about your jacket? Wait, what?
Izuku snapped his gaze back to the students.
To lose your arm and come back so quickly.
Tetsu started tearing up.
I've never seen anyone so manly. No, that's not... We were wrong.
Another Class B student, whom Izuku recognized from the folders as Yorashi Inasa, yelled.
Truly, he is what all us hero students aspire to be.
The other students loudly agreed, clearly moved by what they perceived to be Izuku's bravery and nobility. The only one who didn't share the same sentiment was Monoma, whose eye twitched a bit as he tried to recover the situation.
Maybe so,
Monoma started.
But it's not like they...
Monoma. Aizawa appeared from behind the Class A kids.
You may not have come to cause a physical altercation, but you are clearly trying to harass your fellow students. I'm pretty sure Principal Nezu warned you about this after you were thrown from the cafeteria last week.
Monoma paled as Aizawa continued.
I'm pretty sure that today qualifies as strike 2. You know enough about baseball to know what happens when you hit strike 3, right?
Instead of answering, Monoma just turned and fled. A few seconds later, the rest of the students dispersed, finally clearing the door.
I lost my arm a year ago,
Izuku told empty air. He stood there as the other Class 1A students exited the room, shaken from his confused stupor when he felt a hand pat his shoulder. Giving a jump of surprise, he turned and saw Uraraka leaning down to his level.
Want to come eat lunch with us? She asked. You're practically a classmate already.
Izuku replied, blushing a bit at how close Uraraka was.
I was gonna eat with my classmates, since I haven't actually shared a lunch with them for a while.
He fidgeted nervously for a second when he saw Uraraka pout before continuing.
But I don't think they'd mind if you ate with us.
That brought a smile back to her face. Dang, looking at her, she was almost as pretty as Melissa. With a nod from Uraraka, Izuku smiled and started walking back to Class 1C with her. The minute they approached the door, however, it slid open with a bang. Standing in the doorway was a female student neither of them recognized. Ochako stood tall at 182 centimeters, but this other girl was even taller. She had a pair of small horns jutting from the sides of her head just above the ears. Her skin was fair, but there were emerald scales up the sides of her face and disappearing into her dark blue hair. She looked down at the two students with deep red eyes, full of disinterest, before turning back to the class.
Oscar,
she called with a husky voice.
Coming,
the mousy student replied as he approached. With a nod from the new girl, the two exited the class and walked down the hall, away from the cafeteria. Once she was gone, Izuku and Ochako stepped into the room.
Welcome back, Midoriya-kun.
Hojo, the girl with the long tongue, greeted.
Who was that?
Izuku asked. Maria Draconis, Tabata replied as he stretched his arms. Daughter of the CEO of Draconis Industries. Second-year management student. Oscar eats with her all the time. Yoshio cleared his four-lensed glasses. You must not have seen her yet because your lunches have been elsewhere. Who's the girl you're with? Hayashida smirked as his purple hair flapped without a breeze. She's pretty.
This is Uraraka Ochako. From 1A.
Izuku explained as Ochako gave a slight bow.
She was wondering if she could eat with us. Of course.
Asuna smiled.
We got no qualms with the hero kits, and I recognize her from the USJ. She's fine by me.
After hearing this, the rest of the students gave their agreement, and soon the class plus Ochako made the trek to the cafeteria. Grabbing their food, they picked a corner of the cafeteria for themselves and sat down chatting away. After a minute, Asui and Shiozaki joined them, followed quickly by Kaminari, who had apparently befriended Choji the Wookiee during a part of the USJ incident that no one else had seen. Izuku looked around after he ate. As they ate. There he was, surrounded by friendly faces, chattering away happily. He spied Asui had joined Yoshio in a game of Steel Tabata's Shrimp unnoticed, while Kagero was regaling Shiozaki and Uraraka with some of the stuff Class 1C did. He may not have been talking to anyone, but he wasn't quite ignored either. Sometimes someone would turn to ask him to affirm a statement. Other times, someone would ask him to pass a condiment. He was in a group. He belonged. The feeling he got from this was a happy feeling he would never take for granted. Looking up from his lunch, he saw a flash of gold in the doorway of the cafeteria. Turning towards it, he saw it was Melissa peering into the room with May by her side. After a moment, May spotted Izuku and distinctly pointed at him before walking over, followed by Melissa. In Melissa's arms were a notebook and a few loose pages. Izuku cleared the seat next to him. Ochako had been sitting in the one on his other side, giving Melissa a place to sit as she arrived.
Hey, Midoriya-kun,
she greeted.
I just needed to ask you a few things. Who are you?
Asui asked as Tabata stole one of her shrimps.
Melissa Shield.
May smiled as she sat in the chair across from Melissa.
I'm Hatsume May. We're both support course, and we're making Middle-chan's new arm.
Oh, he told us about that. Hayashida smiled big, the air around him suddenly smelling of cinnamon. Midoriya-kun, you didn't tell us you were on good terms with 3 beautiful ladies.
Don't be so greedy.
This got a laugh from the class as Izuku turned beet red and stammered at defense.
Anyway,
Melissa smiled as the laughing died down.
I wanted to show you what May and I have planned for your arm. But first I need to ask you a question. For the record,
May raised her hand.
I tried to deter her, but the American is persistent. What do you need to know?
He asked nervously. If May had tried to stop her, this could only mean the question was going to be awkward.
I would like to know how you lost your arm,
Melissa replied.
If you could tell me that, I could design the arm with better defenses to prevent it being lost in a similar fashion.
Now hold on. Sakai slithered from his chair to stand next to Izuku.
That's a bit of a personal question. You can't just ask that out of the... It's okay,
Izuku interrupted. All of Class C fell silent on that, watching as Izuku took a few breaths.
I think it'd be safe for me to tell you all, but I'm only going to say this once. I'm not gonna give names, but this is more for your safety than theirs. I don't want any of you to get arrested for attempted murder. What do you mean, attempted?
May's eyes narrowed. She already knew the name of the culprit, but it seemed like she was playing ignorant so that she could hear the full story. This got a slight chuckle out of Izuku before he took a deep breath.
Anyway, it happened a few days after the slime villain incident.
Ooh, what a cliffhanger. Okay.
One sec, y'all. Gonna take a drink and lube up my vocal cords, and then we'll get into chapter 9. Be right back, y'all. Alright. Chapter 9.
History and Progress. Alright. For this chapter, there is a trigger warning of blood, possibly depression. It's not listed, but we are getting into his backstory, so I'm pretty sure that'll come up. The blood and explosions, it says that there's nothing too graphic, but we do, I just want to make sure that those watching do whatever is necessary to keep themselves safe, whether that be skipping the chapter or having someone nearby to talk things out. With that being said, though, let's go ahead and get into the chapter. Izuku walked down the street in a slump. It had been 3 days since the incident with the slime villain. 3 days since he saved Kachan, only to be reprimanded by the heroes, then berated for Kachan for his deed. 3 days since All Might himself told him he couldn't be a hero. Ever since that day, Izuku felt empty. Being a hero was the only thing he'd ever wanted to be. Now, after literally everyone told him no, he just wanted to help people. Oh, excuse me. Now, after literally everyone told him no, he had no idea what to do with himself. He still carried his hero analysis book, but he hadn't opened it for days. It almost felt pointless to now. He just wanted to help people, but how could he when no one would let him? How could he make some impact on this world? Make people feel better? If even villains yelled at him for helping. If even heroes yelled at him for helping. Why did everyone think quirkless meant worthless? He was shaken from his thoughts when he felt the familiar reverberation of an explosion, heard the familiar bang. He turned towards the source and saw a familiar sight. There was Kachan, standing as haughty as ever with his friends. On the ground in front of him was a girl from their school. He recognized her as Aiko, a girl he shared an art class with. He remembered she had mentioned she wanted to enter UA, but only because of their art program. It looked like Kachan didn't care. He wanted to be the only student from their school to enter. He was saying something to her, definitely something insulting, while popping his quirk in her face. Izuku felt his chest heat up. The heroes all praised Kachan. They were saying something like him could be a hero. Izuku was told to be realistic, while someone like him was a shoo-in for heroics. Someone who used their quirk to hurt and demean innocent people. No, that was not right. It wasn't right at all. He wasn't a hero. Kachan was never heroic. Kachan was a... Once again, Izuku found himself moving without thinking, rushing towards the group of students. Bakugo sneered as he shot his right hand out, intent on burning Aiko's face, but caught Izuku by the arm instead. Izuku had thrown himself between the bullies and the girl. Said bullies were surprised and stopped moving for a few seconds, long enough for Aiko to get away.
Deku!
Bakugo growled.
What the hell?
Shut up! Izuku growled. That surprised Bakugo again, whose face twisted in anger.
What did you say, you little?
You heard me, Bakugo. I'm done letting you walk all over everyone just because you have a quirk. I'm done being afraid of you just because you think you're so awesome when you're not.
Deku!
Bakugo growled more. Izuku felt Bakugo burning his arm, but he didn't care anymore. For once in his life, Izuku was angry and he was gonna let it out.
Heroes are supposed to be supportive, uplifting. Heroes use their quirks to make people feel better. Shut up, you! You only use your quirk to hurt people, to destroy their possessions, to make yourself look powerful.
Izuku had tears in his eyes, feeling everything all at once. All the sorrow, his anger, his pain. But he didn't stop. Not even though Bakugo was glaring at him angrier than Izuku had ever seen him before.
You've never used your quirk for a single heroic thing in your entire life.
Deku!
Don't you get it, Bakugo? Are you so egotistical that you can't see it?
Shut the fuck!
You're more like a villain than a hero.
And then everything exploded. The minute Izuku finished his sentence, there was a loud boom and his vision turned white. He felt searing pain in his left arm as the force of the explosion sent him flying. He felt himself bounce off of a hard surface once or thrice before rolling to a stop. There was a loud ringing in his ears, and he had trouble opening his left eye. What little bit he could see through his left eye was spotty and milky. His body ached all over, but curiously, most of his left arm seemed numb. Lying there for who knows how long, he finally realized he had landed on his chest, his face against the pavement. Groaning and crying in pain, he tried to push himself up only to stumble to his left. His stupid numb arm must have buckled. He needed to get up though. He must have landed in the street. He needed to get up before a car hit him. He slowly pushed himself to his knees with his right arm. Why wasn't his left arm cooperating? Come to think of it, sounds on his left side seemed a bit muted too. He slowly lifted his head, trying to get his bearings, but froze. Lying on the ground, mere meters away, was a severed arm. Izuku gasped when it finally sunk in. There was a left arm. It was just lying there. blood pooling around the severed side. Where did it come from? Was someone else caught in Bakugo's explosion? Oh god, did he actually kill someone this time? As he kept staring, Izuku saw the buttons on the cuff of the sleeve around the arm. He recognized the design on them as belonging to Aldera, like him. Were there any other students nearby? Izuku remembered Bakugo's bully friends, but neither of them were wearing their coats. Was there someone else? He looked around best he could, still dazed and mostly deaf from the explosion, but he couldn't see anyone else. The next time he looked at the arm, he noticed something. There was a watch on its wrist. Though it was cracked, he recognized it as a special limited edition All Might watch. There were only 500 ever made, with 100 distributed to 5 stores across Japan. Izuku remembered how he had gotten up before sunrise to get in line for one. He was one of 100 people in Mustafu to have gotten that watch. And he knew for a fact he was the only one in Aldera to get it. Izuku gave a pained gasp at the indication. Did that mean... No, it couldn't be. He turned his head to the left, not noticing the shouts from his right. He moved slowly, not wanting to see what may have been there. Or rather, what may not have been there. He felt someone grab his right shoulder and shake him softly, trying to get his attention. But Izuku was focused on what he saw when he finally looked at his left shoulder. It was gone. His arm was gone. There was a stump in his place, slowly dripping blood from what veins hadn't been cauterized shut by the heat of the explosion. The flesh was uneven and looked like a burnt steak. Izuku gave a quiet gasp when he noticed he could see a bit of bone poking out from the middle. It was his bone. That was his blood. It was gone. He kept staring at his bloody stump, completely oblivious to any pain. Whoever came to check on him was now carrying him and his severed arm away from the scene. Said individual yelled something to someone else before whispering something to Izuku, trying to get the boys to respond. Izuku didn't respond except to slowly grab his stump with his right hand. It was gone. The person carried Izuku into a bright building, his right eye wincing from the sudden light while his still kind of blind left eye remained focused on his stump. The person set him down on something soft and he heard other voices. He couldn't catch what they said. He didn't even realize they were there until someone gently pulled his hand away from his stump. It was gone. His arm was gone. His arm was gone. Izuku gripped his stump again. The pain came flooding back and Izuku screamed. It was a scream of complete agony. A scream of horror and loss. The scream of a destroyed child. Izuku stopped to take a few breaths. It had been a year, but it was still exhausting and painful to remember that day. As he breathed, he looked around to his audience. Students of Class 1C with a handful from 1A, along with May and Melissa. Every single one was dead silent. Even the students who weren't part of the audience seemed muted. He sputtered a few people, such as Melissa and Uraraka, were outright crying. May had a look of absolute fury. She was the only one who knew the name of the culprit, and Izuku could only hope she wouldn't commit murder after lunch. Continuing, he breathed as he rubbed his left shoulder. I later learned that it was Kamui Woods who carried me to the clinic. The doctors there was able to use his quirk to repair my eye and ears. He also lessened the burn scars around my head. Now they're kinda hard to see under my hair. He couldn't fix your arm, though. Tabata stated.
No.
Izuku sighed.
The heat from the explosion cauterized the wound too much for him to reattach it. The only quirk doctors who would have needed to operate within a certain time limit, and that they were too far away to help. In the end, it was decided that the stump would be amputated. What happened after that?
Sakai asked from his spot on the floor next to Izuku.
Did the douchebag get punished?
After chuckling at how the snake had used that word, Izuku continued.
He was sent to juvenile detention for a few months. Since this was the first time offense on a spotless record, he got off easy. Spotless?
Kakushi scoffed.
He blew your freaking arm off.
Didn't your school do something? Choji asked from behind Melissa.
They moved me to a different class. Even after that, the principal and teachers were intent on getting him into UA, and didn't want me distracting him.
Several students exclaimed their displeasure at this, getting loud before Izuku raised his hand.
It's alright though. The principal himself barred him from the entrance exam. On top of that, there was a huge investigation of the school at the end of the year that affected the entire school. What happened at the end of the year?
Yoshu asked.
Was the school shut down? Please tell me it was shut down.
Izuku gave him a nervous chuckle.
It was obliterated. The Death Star Agency investigated the school due to rumors of discrimination and corruption. I was called to testify about the quirkless discrimination going on there. As a result, more than half the teachers lost their teaching licenses, and most of them went to jail too. The remaining teachers resigned, and the school was shut down. Though, after what Principal Nezu's told me, I wonder if he had a hand in it.
Meanwhile, up in the principal's office, Nezu gave a sinister chuckle as he eavesdropped on the entire conversation through the cafeteria's security cameras, remembering just how delightful it had been to destroy that prejudiced school. Back in the cafeteria, Izuku took a breath and looked back at his friends.
Anyway, that's how I lost my arm. And that's why I was so depressed at the start of the year. But things are better now.
He smiled with tears in his eyes.
I'm in UA. I have all of you now. I'm not alone anymore.
The instant he said this sentence, his entire class cried out and tackled him, wrapping him in a group hug unlike any he had felt before. Izuku thought he could hear Ida from Class 1A shout about being quiet from somewhere else in the room, but he couldn't quite hear him over everyone in his class talking all at once, all saying nice things to him. Melissa and the Class 1A students only watched, not sure they would have been welcome to join in the hug, but they cried all the same. Mei was crying profusely, a mixture of sorrow over what happened to Izuku and unadulterated rage at what this Bakugo Katsuki did to him. She knew Izuku wouldn't like it if she went out hunting for him, but on the off chance she happened to stumble into him somewhere, well, he was going to learn the hard way just what happens during a vasectomy. It was the end of the school day. Vlad King was making his rounds to make sure the students had all gone home. As he did, he remembered this past afternoon. His class finally got to meet that quirk specialist Netsu had told them about, and was shocked to see it was a one-armed quirkless kid from Gen Ed. Even more surprising was that his class had apparently run into him before lunch, assumed he was from Class 1A, and thought he lost his arm during the USJ incident. He had to admit it was pretty funny watching everyone's reactions to him explaining that part. As he stepped outside, he heard a rumble from around the corner. Too loud to be a custodian. Vlad decided to investigate. Before he even turned the corner, though, a large foot stomped into the ground mere meters away. Looking up, he saw it belonged to a really tall UA student. She seemed to be trying to catch a particularly fat student who was somehow around 3 meters above the ground. Said student was also somehow flattening and expanding himself over and over to avoid her grip. Vlad was about to intervene, assuming this was a fight, until he noticed there were more students in the field. He saw one stocky boy with spikes on his back and arms dodging a large snake in a uniform as it seemed to fly at him from different directions. Towards the far end of the field was a really hairy student, throwing boulders at the barriers erected by another student. What was going on? Thankfully, he received his answer when he turned his head a bit more and saw a group of students huddled in the corner. He noticed they were talking to the quirk specialist from earlier, and Aizawa was leaning over him, looking at whatever was in the kid's hand. He began to walk towards the group, but stopped when he saw Aizawa and had noticed him and started jogging in his direction. "What's going on here?" Vlad asked as the racer had approached. "Class 1C is using the field," Aizawa replied. "The sports festival is in 2 weeks, and Midoriya's class wants to do good in it. They're going to be using the same field to practice quirks and tactics." Vlad was initially going to ask just how good they'd be, considering they weren't Hero Course, but then he remembered that it was Class 1C who came to support the Hero Kids during the USJ incident. They'd been strong enough to fight villains, even without any form of hero training. Maybe they could get pretty far. Especially that... Wait. Didn't Class 1C have a girl with an ice quirk? She left earlier, Aizawa replied. She said she had something that needed doing. Moriboshi sat at the base of a tree, wearing a casual outfit. Said tree was in a secluded area just outside of town, away from any potential prying eyes. Normally, she didn't come out here, but she was waiting for someone. As said individual approached, she got to her feet and regarded him coolly. "I admit," she stated, "I was beginning to think this request was a joke." "I do not make jokes," Todoroki Shoto said as he approached. "I asked you to meet me out here because I have a request. No, a plea, if you will." Moriboshi quirked an eyebrow as Todoroki took a breath. "Could you teach me to use ice like you do?" She stared at him silently for a while, long enough to make him feel uncomfy.
"The techniques I know are not things you can half-ass,"
she finally responded.
"You would have to put everything you have into mastering them."
"I understand." Todoroki nodded.
"That includes your fireside."
"What?" Todoroki's eyes widened. "Why would I need to practice my fireside, which I am sworn to never touch, if I wish to master ice techniques?"
"Because your fireside is linked to your ice,"
Moriboshi said as she walked closer to the hero student.
"You know Midoriya-kun, right? You know how he studied quirks for years? During his studies, he's learned that dual quirks like yours are a single quirk, rather than 2 separate quirks. You can practice your ice side all you want, but your inexperience with your fire side will weigh you down."
Seeing the confusion on his face, Moriboshi sighed, trying to remember how Midoriya had described it to her earlier, before looking up at Shoto.
Your quirk, she explained, is like twin swords. They're both powerful weapons, but only if you use them. If you reject one sword and never use it, not only are you hindering your own combat potential, but leaving that sword on your hip is making dead weight, leaving you off balance at best. You're refusing to use your fire side because your sperm donor is Endeavor, right? While any anger you feel towards him is undoubtedly justified, not using your fire quirk because of him is like refusing to use a sword just because someone else has a sword just like it. You can't do that and expect to win many fights, because you can bet villains will use every weapon they have. She turned and started walking away, leaving Todoroki to contemplate her words, before stopping and turning back to him. Use your fire, Todoroki. Once you can do that, I'll teach you what's safe for you to learn. She took a few more steps.
Wait, he called out. What do you mean, what's safe for me to learn?
You'll see in 2 weeks.
She continued walking after this. She did want to teach him, to help him, but she couldn't do that before he learned to accept himself. All of himself. Alright, y'all. Ooh, that chapter was heavy. Ooh. I really am falling in love with the way that Mad Nimrod is developing these characters, though. And I will say, I'm kind of glad that Bakugo went to juvie, but the fact that he was only in it for a few months is pretty angering, not gonna lie. Like, I kind of really hope someone deals with Bakugo at some point in this series. One thing I've done with this series, these podfics, is I don't read ahead so that I can give my honest commentary at the end. That's a slight change I've been kind of moving into. But, holy cow. I really hope Bakugo gets his comeuppance, and I'm very, very curious to see where it ends up going with the sports festival. But having said all that, I really hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to drop them in the comments down below. I do my best to respond to each comment, whether it be with just a heart if it's something nice you're saying, or full-on conversations for for comments that I feel I can respond to, if that makes sense. But yeah, thank you guys so much for coming and hanging out. We're almost to 200 subscribers. Hopefully we'll hit that within the next few days. And with all that said, I really hope to see you guys in my next episode. And yeah, ciao for now.